けど久しぶりにバイブス上げてこう嬉しそうできるスイカ
Hey there everybody and welcome to another episode of the Castaway Anime Podcast. I'm Neon Manta.
And I'm Crunchy Bagels.
And we're here taking off with everyone's favorite new Netflix-produced anime, Canadian Monogatari.
As it's been called by and large. Although, I will say the label, as, you know, the number one Monogatari fan on the podcast, that is one of one, it bears little resemblance, aside from some passing pedophilia. But, you know, in Scott Pilgrim does not even hold a candle to the amount of pedophilia in Monogatari. Let me just say that right out of the gate. It's severely lacking in that regard, and that's really why the anime didn't turn out as good as it could have been.
Yeah,
I just filtered everyone, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, only the real Pilgrim heads will stick around for this one now. I will not be surprised if there's a massive drop-off point in viewership after the first minute, but you know what? Only
to be fair, that would be there regardless, so you can't necessarily blame me.
Yeah, but the real ones, the real fans will stick around. Yeah, we're talking about the new Scott Pilgrim anime, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. And if you want to help us take off this podcast off the ground, haha, then be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. Like the video, head on down to the comments, tell us what you think, and all that good stuff. Now grab a drink, kick back, and listen up, because this may take a while.
You know, having watched the anime now, I see why they call it Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Because he takes off and doesn't return until episode 6.
Yeah, so before we dive into the show at large, I feel like first things first, we got to get this off our chest. Yes, retard, this is an anime.
Yeah, so we were ranting about this right before the podcast began, that my anime list... okay, so yet more evidence of AniList being the Chad. AniList has it listed on its site, Mal does not. And for what reason? I can't tell, because they have Bishonen Tentaiden on there as a novel, as opposed to a light novel, even though it's supposed to catalog light novels as opposed to novels. And so, like, that's on there, even though it probably shouldn't be. There are
novels listed on my anime list.
Well, yeah, but I mean, isn't it for cataloging novels? If they're light novels. Because if they're including novels now, then boy, do they have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, I feel like, because what I'm trying to think, what was it called? Juni Tyson by Nisio Isin while we're on the Monogatari kick. That's not a light novel. That's just a straight up novel, right?
I'd have to look it up, but that sounds right because Bishonen Tentaiden is also from Nisio Isin and also a novel, as opposed to a light novel. I guess their rationale is just, it's Nisio Isin. Like, he threads the needle between light and normal novels.
Yeah, maybe because it has to have, like, a root in the anime or manga's light novel industry, because, like, then by that metric, any Japanese novel or any novel written in Japan can qualify to be on my anime list, and that's, like, a shit ton of books.
Cringe.
So... yeah,
but my main point there isn't necessarily that Bishonen Tentaiden shouldn't be there, although it probably shouldn't, let's be real. But what I'm getting at is there is more justification for taking Bishonen Tentaiden off of Mal than Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, but what's there to argue against? The director is a member of Science Saru, just because he's I'm pretty sure he's South American. Gongora sounds like a South American name to me. Please correct me if I'm wrong. He's been a Japanese citizen for at least 10 years. He's a member of Team Science Saru. It hasn't, just because it's internationally produced by Netflix and written by the original Canadian author of the comic book, and executive produced by Edgar Wright. who directed the Scott Pilgrim movie. Just because the production committee is, American, doesn't mean it's not an anime. Fucking, I'm pretty positive CD Projekt Red helped produce Cyberpunk Edgerunners.
Yeah, and isn't Science Saru the one animating it? And so
Yes.
they're clearly the majority of the staff on there. I would imagine anyway.
Yeah, I see a majority of the when I saw the credits every episode on Netflix, there was like a shit ton of Japanese names.
See, I did not sit through the credits each episode. It's just a black screen, so I was like, I can go with skipping these. Although, if I were interested in who made it, I probably should have.
Yeah, they sync the lip flaps to the Japanese dub. It's a fucking anime. But my anime list, stop fucking around and put it on there so I can rate it. Not being able to chronicle an anime that I watched on my anime list is gonna haunt me to the end of my days.
Maybe there's just some argument I don't know about, but maybe that's the kicker. But I can't really think of any, because I feel like maybe a decade ago, maybe not quite a decade ago, I don't know, like 5 years ago, you could maybe make a case for, well, it was released, not on Japanese television, but instead Netflix. But we live in the era where JoJo's is on Netflix, and Cyberpunk Edgerunners is on Netflix, and presumably not on Japanese television because it started off as, Netflix originals.
What about shit like Devilman Crybaby?
Only. Yeah, that's an anime. So release method can't be it. The staff is primarily Japanese. Sure, there like many other people who they brought on. It has to be
the production committee being American.
I would want to look at the production committee in fine detail and see exactly what role each of them has. Maybe what they're going off of is that the producer who wanted the show to be made, because producers are actually, like, their role in making anime is severely underappreciated by Western anime fans. Producers are often the ones to get anime made. They're the ones with the idea of, hey, let's get this director to make this show. So maybe what they're going off of is that the producer, the dude who was like, hey, I'm gonna get, like, Edgar Wright. Would that be the guy?
Yeah, he's the, well, I think he's like the big executive producer because he was the one who originally directed the Scott Pilgrim 2010 movie.
So he was the one who came, presumably, once again, I don't really know.
I believe it was a collaborative idea between him, Bryan Lee O'Malley, the author of Scott Pilgrim, and Netflix. I don't know if Science Saru was approached by them to be like, hey, do you want to animate a Scott Pilgrim anime? Or Netflix was like, okay, here's our list of studios that we can work with. Which one should we contract to make the show? But I'm very positive
that's what they're going off of.
Yeah. It's either way, it's really dumb that people even are even remotely considering that this is not an anime when literally all of the anime-isms are here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of how the executive producer being American would make it not an anime. Maybe the rationale is, well, it was an American who had the idea.
It's not a 100% Japanese original production.
Well, no anime nowadays is.
That's why
we outsource to China constantly.
Yeah,
even back in the day, we outsourced to the Philippines.
Yeah,
and China still.
So, anyone who's saying that this is not an anime, shut up. It is, and die, please.
I see you're set on filtering yet more people from the podcast.
Well, okay, these are the kind of people that should be filtered.
So yeah, as far as I know, there's not really a compelling argument against it. I'm maybe not as hard against it being considered not anime as Neon. That's just because maybe there's a case. No, I once got outraged that Bishonen Tentaiden was not on any list, but now I kind of see their point because, light novels are determined by publishing label. Bishonen Tentaiden was published in a novel publishing label as opposed to a light novel one makes sense to me. So maybe some sort of revelation like that can happen to me again. So commenters, if you have more info on this, leave it in the comments below. I'm willing to hear you out.
Yeah, well, we're no more talking about the what is and what isn't. Now we have to of an anime. Now we gotta talk about what was, and what was Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, the Netflix anime based on the Scott Pilgrim series of graphic novels by Bryan Lee O'Malley.
I, before this point, was a Scott Pilgrim virgin who had never consumed anything Scott Pilgrim related in my life, and in fact, didn't even really know what it was about. And after watching the anime, I can safely say that I should not have started with the anime.
Yeah. Okay, so Crunchy, I gotta issue a half apology to you because we got bamboozled. And it was not, I did not mean to lead you astray like this. Because when this anime was announced, you know that I was, sucking its dick to high heaven. I was like, oh my god, a Scott Pilgrim anime. This is one of those, not even in my wildest dreams, announcements that I think that this could have been lined up as perfectly as it was. Because, alright, it's by Bryan Lee O'Malley writing the thing, so we know that it can't possibly have go so far off the rails and disrespect the original because it's made by the dude who made the original. Executive produced by Edgar Wright, so their hearts are in the right place. Animated by Science Saru, who are doing their best Trigger impression. Science Saru are great animators. They're one of the few studios who don't treat their staff like shit. Cough cough Mappa. It's being directed by Abel Gongora, who was an episode director on OKKO, which was a very Scott Pilgrim-esque cartoon. It's got music by Anama Noguchi, who were the composers of the Scott Pilgrim 2010 beat 'em up video game, and they got the voice cast for the English dub. All the actors and actresses from the Scott Pilgrim movie to reprise their roles as the voice cast. This for all intents and purposes should have been lined up as the greatest adaptation of all time. Because literally, it's like the Power Rangers Megazord of adaptations, because they're taking the best parts of each individual piece of the Scott Pilgrim pie and combining their forces together to make something stronger than the sum of their parts. And I know that as a Scott Pilgrim fan who has seen the movie and has read a couple of the comics, I've not finished them yet, but I've had the general idea and the story bits of the comics explained to me in video essays, and I'm a huge fan of Scott, at the very least the aesthetic of Scott Pilgrim. I adore the art style. I adore the punk mixed with comic book anime-ish aesthetic. I love the...
See, the aesthetic is probably my favorite part of the show, because there are almost very few parts that even look remotely rough. It's super stylized visuals, super well directed, super good character art, it looks distinct. It's one of those rare anime where it feels like the visuals are firing on all cylinders, where the backgrounds fit the characters, and the characters fit the backgrounds, and the characters are constantly emoting and making these wacky expressions, and it feels distinct from anything else you've seen, at least on a visual level. It's really good stuff. In terms of the visuals, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, the closest I could compare it to is something like Panty and Stocking, once again bringing up Gynax and Trigger. If Scott Pilgrim... because the comic originated in 2004. If Gynax was still around today, which they pretty much are in the vein of Trigger, but if 90s and 2000s Gynax are still going, they never went down the Trigger route, I guarantee you they would have been doing the Scott Pilgrim anime, or they would have been chomping at the bit to make something like Scott Pilgrim. What this anime in particular reminded me of was Fooly Cooly. I don't know if you've seen Fooly Cooly before, but it was.
I've seen clips of it.
Okay, yeah, this was given off major FLCL vibes with all the the crazy, like, the world where all these powers are, these guys are like, they like, when they interact, they are like talk like human beings, but then they also have these crazy powers that you just have to accept, and they don't ever go so far outside the realm of plausibility where it's like, oh, that's really stupid. Usually they're left to say, oh, okay, that's like funny stupid. Like, oh, a vegan gets psychic powers because he's a vegan and he's like transcended the limits of man.
Yeah, and
like,
a robot is the perfect vegan, where they don't eat meat, but at the same time, they're bereft of the flaws of humans. I thought that was pretty funny.
And that's why they're able to be perfectly removed from the limitations of the, like, time-space continuum, and they can exist at every single point in the timeline. Like, that's the kind of, that's fucking trigger logic right there. Like, I was still, when I saw the show got announced and it was said Science Saru was making it, not Trigger, I was like, are y'all pulling the wool over my eyes? This looks exactly like something Imaishi and the boys would make.
Yeah, I do see where you're coming from with that.
But back to the original point that I was making. I did not mean to lead you astray making this your first introduction to Scott Pilgrim, because we were under the impression, all our Scott Pilgrim bros, the Pilgrim heads out there, were under the impression that this was going to be a straightforward anime adaptation of the comic books, and, you know, maybe the movie as well, because depending on who you ask, the movie has left a bigger impact on the culture, like, as a whole, because of Edgar Wright's style, and I think arguably the movie is a little more popular than the comics. But if you ask some random schmuck if they ever heard, hey, do you know what Scott Pilgrim is, they'll probably say, oh yeah, I love that movie, and they're more likely to say that before they say, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite comics. But
I will say the anime is an effective advertisement for the comics.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend the comics. They're really good.
It seems like something up my alley, but yeah, I'll let you continue before I go on to my opinions.
Yeah, so we were all like sitting there in so much anticipation, so much hope and joy in our hearts, because let me put this into perspective. Scott Pilgrim has a cult following fan base. It's comprised before the anime came out. It was comprised of 3 pieces of media. The comic book that ran from 2004 to 2010 for 6 volumes. The movie in 2010 by Edgar Wright. An animated short, which was kind of more of a promotion for the movie that aired on Adult Swim, that doesn't look nearly as good as this anime. It was more like a motion comic, if anything. And a video game in 2010 that also has a cult following, especially when it got notoriously delisted from it was a digital only game, and it got delisted from storefronts it was on, so it kind of became semi-lost media until it got officially re-released by Ubisoft earlier this decade.
Why was it delisted?
It means it no longer sold.
Well,
it was sold for a time, but yeah, it was for a few years. So it just
wasn't getting enough sales?
Well, no, not even that. It just, I think that it was like a licensing issue. Like the publisher, the licensing rights to the comic expired, so they were like, well, we can't sell the game anymore. Whoopsie.
All right, I get that.
Yeah, so, if you're a Scott Pilgrim fan, not counting the animated short, because that's more of like that's more of a bonus feature to the movie. There are 3 pieces of Scott Pilgrim content. And we have not gotten a new official thing since 2010, where the comic, the movie, and the game all came out in the same year. 2010 was simultaneously the best and worst year to be a Scott Pilgrim fan, because it was when you got a baller movie, the conclusion to the baller-ass comic, a baller-ass game, but now it's like, well, shit, now Scott Pilgrim is over. Now there's nothing left, and there's a 13-year drought. No more Scott Pilgrim anything aside from the game getting re-released and, you know, maybe I think there was a 10th anniversary screening of the movie in theaters, but whatever, that doesn't count. This is the first new thing of Scott Pilgrim in 13 years. And fans of Scott Pilgrim have been clamoring for an animated series for a long time because they want nothing more than the complete 6-volume comic to be adapted in its entirety to either the big screen or the small screen, either as a TV show or a movie. Because the movie, as good as it is very rushed in terms of the comic, because it's trying to adapt 5 volumes of a comic book, and the 6th one was still being worked on while the movie was being made, so you can imagine the kind of production nightmare that would have been in the writer's room. So they had to cram 6 volumes of a comic into one movie. And now here we are. We're like on the cusp of greatness. Our prayers were seemingly answered. Scott Pilgrim is getting a goddamn animated series, not just by any old, fucker animation studio, by Science Saru, a trusted boys who made my beloved The Goat, Keep Your Hands Off Azakin, the studio made by one of the other goats of the anime industry, Masaaki Yuasa. Didn't work on this show, but Science Saru tends to be one of those trustworthy studio names. You can have a glimmer of quality, like a bare minimum amount of quality to be guaranteed from a show like this. A studio of this caliber. And so, with all the trailers being shown off and all the sick character designs and the voice cast being announced and O'Malley being a part of the writer team, I can never say their name right. Anama Noguchi being part of the music team. Like, all of the pieces were set up to make this the greatest slam dunk in probably, like, anime as a whole. Like, that every little piece was lined up in this perfect string of dominoes to be knocked over to deliver us the quintessential Scott Pilgrim experience. We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close, and then they fucking did it, cucked us. There's no way around it. Pilgrim Bros, we got cucked.
We got jebaited. Well, I say we. I was not one of the Pilgrim Bros, but even I still got jebaited with my minimal knowledge of Scott Pilgrim.
All right, Crunchy, let me paint a picture for you. You know how much I was sucking off this show's dick as soon as it got announced, and I was even back in the seasonal cast for this season, the fall. I was like, oh yeah, fuck Frieren, fuck Undead Unluck. This is gonna be my anime of the season, if not anime of the year. Maybe Zom 100 would give it some competition because it's hitting close to home, but like if this is as good as the trailers make it out to be, it's gonna be a perfect 10. This show kind of sucks.
I wonder. Yeah, so I'll just say right out the gate, I'm hovering between a strong 5 and a light 6. That is where my score is.
I'm literally same. I thought about giving it a 6, but because I was like, I think I was like trying to bullshit like copium Stockholm syndrome myself.
I'm still
coping because I'm like,
I'm not even a Scott Pilgrim fan, and I'm coping.
This is the first thing of Scott Pilgrim we've gotten in 13 years. Like, should I be ungrateful? Or should I be fucking pissed off that what I thought was going to be an adaptation of the comics turned out to be a soft reboot? This is the equivalent of this is the Marvel What If of the Scott Pilgrim universe.
Yeah, so it very much is a what if scenario, and in order to be this what if scenario, what they ended up doing is making one really great first episode that
I was
hits
smiling,
all the beats you
I
would
was smiling
expect
ear to ear that entire first episode until the ending
I was
happened.
so excited.
And I was like, huh? That's not how
the
it goes.
ending caught me really off guard. And see, even as early as episode 2, right? As someone who didn't know how the original went, I was already raising an eyebrow of, okay, how does Scott Pilgrim dying factor into the themes this story has presented, the character development that he should be going through? Spoiler alert, it doesn't. It's in It's so frustrating. So my
I
idea
have
of what
never
Scott
been
Pilgrim is
so disappointed in a show before. I can't remember the last
oh,
time
ever?
I can't remember the last time I had like 10 out of 10 expectations only to be slapped with a 5 out of 10 thing.
So how I've had Scott Pilgrim described to me is, I saw this from just a random Twitter poster, right? Scott Pilgrim, according to them, is a show about a terrible person becoming a slightly less terrible person by the end. And that is an innately fascinating premise to me, because I A, like self-improvement shows, and B, am a Mushoku Tensei fan. So I am used to protagonists being just the worst person in existence. Just absolutely horrible. Scott Pilgrim is a 23-year-old dating a 17-year-old. Granted, it's a fake sort of relationship, which just compounds it, by the way. He's leading her on. He's mooching off his roommate. He's socially awkward. He approaches Ramona Flowers, and the first thing out of his mouth is fucking stuff about Sonic the Hedgehog. Hey, you know Sonic the Hedgehog?
Scott Pilgrim, like me, sees a cute girl with dyed hair at a party and tries to talk to her and break the ice in conversation by talking about 90s Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon voice actor trivia. We're reaching Riz levels that shouldn't even be possible.
There's this one moment where you really get a feeling for just how awkward he is. He's like, I see so one of us went to, I think it was St. Xavier's school. Yeah, I think it was St. Xavier's school for the gifted youngsters. And he was like, one of us went there and one of us didn't. And he doesn't realize how much of a douche he comes off as. It's like he's trying so hard to be, but he doesn't know how it comes off. But it's funny because of that.
Yeah, it's like, well, first off, because I don't know if I'm gonna have a better time to slot this in. I'm sure you've seen some of the discourse surrounding Scott Pilgrim, as a whole, not just the show, but
I have not. Maybe in a very limited capacity.
The infamous Scott Pilgrim's dating a high schooler, like that kind of thing on Twitter.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of that, but no one that actually hates the series I've seen post that. It's all people who are fans of it memeing around.
Well, it's a lot of,
at least.
The discourse of like people, every time a new generation of people get introduced to Scott Pilgrim, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard good things about this, and now that this anime is coming out, I guess it's a good excuse to check it out. Hey, why is the protagonist dating a high schooler? That's kind of cringe, bro. And they're like, well, yeah, of course it's cringe. That's the fucking point. The point
is that Scott Pilgrim is the worst.
Yeah,
the point is you don't want to be like him.
This is the easiest media literacy check in history. Just because the character is the protagonist does not mean they have to be a good person.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I passed that check because I'm a Mushoku Tensei fan, the most punished fan base in existence. Especially with season 2.
Because you're a Monogatari fan, and this is Canada's Monogatari. Just like how regular show is America's Monogatari.
I've never heard that one before, but
I was positing the question to myself. I was like, if Scott Pilgrim is Canadian Monogatari, what is American Monogatari? And for some reason, regular show was the first and only thing to pop into my head.
How is regular show is any show in existence just the Monogatari of that? You know what? That's how we should start describing shows from now on. This is X country's Monogatari, and it's just a random. Or no, the prerequisite is the show has to have a pedophile in it. That's the only prerequisite.
Is there a pedophile in regular show? I don't think there is.
No, because it's a children's show. Of course there isn't.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was gonna say there's has to be like one in Adventure Time, but then I remembered Ice King. As soon as Princess Bubblegum got turned into a 13-year-old, he was like, "Well, I'm out of here. See ya." He's like, he'll kidnap and force women to marry him, but he ain't no pedo.
Yeah, so and I guess we're still looking for America's Monogatari for the time being.
Yeah, comments,
where
please
were
let us
we?
know. What is America's Monogatari? Give us your thoughts.
That I am interested in. But yeah, like he uses his roommate's credit card. He's pathetic.
Yeah, and like the discourse every time people get into Scott Pilgrim is like, oh, why is he dating a high schooler? That's like I can't like him as a main character. It's like, well, you're not supposed to like him completely. The point is that Scott Pilgrim is not a good person. Like, and where the anime already immediately took a big misstep was not starting the show with the same way that the comic starts and with the movie starts, because they are both quick to let you know that, hey, the titular character of the series, he's dating a high schooler. Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler. That is how both the comic and the movie start, and the anime does not start that way. They do a funny little thing where it's like, Knives Chau, 17 years old. Fun fact, she's dating Scott. Parentheses, more on that later. But it's used like it was purposefully made to be the opening line of the comic by being like, wow, that's it works both as like an attention grabber and as a wait, why is he doing that though?
Yeah, I mean, now that you're describing that opening to me, I do think that would be a lot more effective of an opening. Although I still think the first episode does a great job of setting up him as being pathetic, because the way this opens, you know, he's in bed with his gay roommate. He himself not being gay, of course, and then we get the labels of all the things in their room, and it's all his roommate stuff. I forget his fucking name somehow, but it's all his stuff. Yeah, Wallace. And then like it says clothes on the floor, Scott's.
Yeah,
immediately puts into
poster,
perspective.
Scott.
Then everything else is Wallace's. You know, he goes to the party, and everyone immediately leaves him. You know,
Yeah,
it's all sorts of little stuff that compounds on it, on itself.
Yeah, like he has friends, but it looks like they only tolerate him as opposed to like actually liking him.
Yeah,
he's in a band.
His friends are constantly fed up with him.
Yeah, they only keep him around because he's good at bass.
Yeah, and so it's so hard not to be intrigued by Scott Pilgrim, the character, because the first episode just does such a good job of making you be like, oh, this is what he's like. I want to see him get better, because that feels like where it's going. You really want to see him improve from that. It's a very immediate hook. To me, Scott Pilgrim is easily the best character in the show, and that's based solely, pretty much solely on the first episode and how it built him up, because he's just so compelling. It's so compelling. I think we should have more shows about just the worst people, honestly, and seeing like, how do we make the worst people better? Because most people aren't as bad as Scott Pilgrim. That's actually kind of impressive if you are as bad or worse than him. And so,
like,
you know,
yeah, the reason he's dating a high schooler is because he's you know, he's lonely, but he doesn't understand how relationships work, because he's been in several of them even before Ramona shows up. He's had Envy Adams, Kim Pine, but you know, he's clearly not in a state where he should be having a relationship, even though he's trying to fulfill this void in his heart, but like, because he feels like he needs to have someone, and that's why he's going after this high schooler, because hey, she's like madly in love with me, but I don't want to, because she's this high school girl that I don't really like. I'm gonna keep her at arm's length, so I can, you know, flirt around with her, you know, pal around when the mood strikes, but you know, to keep the bad thoughts at bay. But you know, as the second he lays eyes on Ramona, he's like, oh, who knives who?
It's blatantly manipulative behavior, and what I like even more, Knives Chau, unironically, one of the best characters in the show, because she's such a perfect, she's the perfect character for this dynamic, because she's immediately set up to be like this pure angel, right? She's extremely naive, probably a little immature even for her age at 17, which is already, pretty young. You'd expect someone that age to be naive, but she's somehow even more naive than you would expect. She's so easily made giddy at him just playing in the band. She's completely head over heels for him.
I called it
is
before
willing...
the show even came out. I was like, all right, yeah, this is absolutely gonna be Crunchy's favorite character, not even close.
Probably my second favorite character, let's be real.
Well, favorite girl at the very least. She's gonna be your best
favorite girl, absolutely. And guess what? Hey, I'm 19, so hey, why don't you ditch Scott and...
You do have a point. It's too late for me because I am Scott's age. But I will say though, as someone who is familiar with the Knives Chau of both the movie and the comic, this show bastardizes her. Well,
really?
Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Like everything up to the first episode is 100% comic accurate until the Scott Pilgrim gets killed.
Okay, well after that she's way less interesting. So yeah,
as
I see where you.
Yeah, because the whole
I need to
idea...
emphasize, when I say I like a character, it's probably because I like their first episode version. Must get that out of the way.
Yeah, so with Knives, like her deal is that she goes on, dating Scott and Ramona at the same time, and she doesn't know about Ramona obviously because he's like figuring out like, oh, do I have to break up with her? Like we weren't even actually dating. And it's like, yeah, but she thinks you are, Scott, so you do have to, end this relationship that you really shouldn't have fucking had in the first place because you're 23, she's 17, and and even disregarding the age gap, you never even liked her to begin with. You're only dating her because she likes you and you just want someone that you can have around, like at arm's length. So if you're gonna be with Ramona, you gotta drop her. He doesn't do that in the comic or the movie. He goes on dates with them both. He goes out with Ramona because he's genuinely interested in her, and then he goes out with Knives to placate her. So Knives is like the good version of Ruka from Rent-A-Girlfriend.
Yeah, where it's like she's pathetic, but you understand why, and it endears you to her because you want her
Knives
to be
isn't even really that pathetic. She's just
well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe
soul
pathetic's the
getting
wrong
manipulated,
word, but
and she's putting all this blind faith. Like there is a small bit of like onus on her to be like, hey, you really shouldn't be going after a 23-year-old, but most of the blame lies with Scott. And like,
I wouldn't even say the onus is on her for that. Maybe the only onus would be in recognizing that, hey, a guy who only holds your hand, won't even kiss you, probably ain't that into you. But then there's the obvious caveat of she's 17, my guy, and not even mature for her age.
Yeah, hang on. I won't go into all of the nitty gritty of the comic because I do want you to experience it for yourself, but
I want to experience that raw. Yeah,
there's so many cool things about Knives that happens in the comic. Like remember her ninja design that shows up at the end of the episode?
Yes.
And how it's like not earned, and like, well, I can't even.
I remembered you mentioning in like my Discord server. Oh yeah, she has this iconic ninja design, and then I saw it in the final episode, and I was like, "But why, other than to have it?"
Yeah, like see in here, it's like not earned, and I say earned in the context of the comic because the reason that she like becomes this she gets the red streak in her hair and like it becomes all ninja is because she's like I'll say this in the least like spoiler way possible so that way you can understand the gist without like having the whole of her arc spoiled. She is not over Scott. She does end up losing Scott, but she's not over it, and she's like trying to, because she sees Scott fighting for Ramona's favor against the 7 evil exes, so she's like, all right, Scott, I will fight Ramona for your honor. and then you'll go out with me, and it's like it's all this
That's
poor misguided.
that sounds like such a good arc. I want to see that.
It's like it's so like it's sad
Like,
to see her go through
and she cuts her
misguided.
hair like it's almost like this girl cuts hair character arc, but she totally isn't like over him.
Yeah, and then
Like-
I'm looking on Google to find it right now.
See, if she had cut her hair specifically for the ninja design to do that, I wouldn't have even cried when she cut her hair.
I'm trying to find the comic panel because it's so good and tells you everything that like would get you the most excited to see how her and Scott's arc wraps up.
I mean, I'm already excited, man, so if you can't find it, no worries.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, while I found the first half. I found the cause. I need to see the effect. Yeah, I don't know. Talk more about what Knives does in the show.
So, post episode 1, she, first of all, after Scott dies, she's like, ah, damn, he's dead. Now, first, she, like, takes out her anger on Ramona, because I guess by this, it's sort of brushed over in the moment, but I guess by this point, she's aware that, hey, he was two-timing her. And so, he's posted the panels.
I've done it. It's a lower res than I would like, but
Yeah, I mean, I can barely read it, but I can see the facial expressions.
yeah, the bottom part is the most important one, where Scott asks Knives if they want to have like here it is right here, even with the facial expression.
Do you want to have
he's like-
sex? I think we should have sex. Casual sex.
Casual sex.
He's so
and then
pathetic.
and then see her reaction to it.
Yeah, I mean, all
that
of her
is all I'll say
expressions
on
are
that.
just adorable.
Knives is the cutest character in the whole show. You know, the hottest is debatable. I do not want to end up a Scott Pilgrim, but definitely cutest. Those fucking Funko Pop black button eyes, the cutest.
Yeah, she's adorable and must be protected at all costs. But yeah, post episode 1, she just sort of gets over him by being into music. She does music, and it's not a particularly compelling arc, like, at all. In fact, the only reason I was joyful whenever she was on screen past that point was just to see her, because her design is so cute. Like, every expression she makes is the greatest, the cutest, the pure joy. Like, in episode 3, when she's, jamming out on the bass, and it's just this, it has this mystical vibe to it. God, I need to sneeze. Oh, wait, no, it passed. Okay. Yeah, they're jamming out. She's apparently, like, some savant at instruments and can learn them in 4 hours. And so she does that. And yeah, they do music together, and eventually they make a musical about Scott Pilgrim, the original story. This show is so meta. It gets really confusing to talk about at a certain point, but they make Scott Pilgrim the musical, and through doing that, she's over him because God, they go so long without even addressing the fact that, like, she knows he was two-timing. Then at the end, like, I think it was
She
episode
doesn't even
5.
care. Whereas
It
she
feels
cares
like she-
immensely in the comic.
Dude, in episode 2, when, fucking, the one superstar, you'll have to
Adams?
remind me of, Envy Adams. She immediately stops thinking about Scott Pilgrim's death. Actually, everyone in there immediately stops thinking about his death, which, to be fair, is kind of par for the course with Scott, but you wouldn't
He's
think
like the
Knives
Cosmo
would
of
be
the
like
Scott
that.
Pilgrim world.
Yeah, but of all the characters to immediately forget about Scott Pilgrim as soon as she's there, it wouldn't be Knives. At least you wouldn't think it'd be. But nope, she's so head over heels for this pop star, Envy Adams. I really need to commit names to memory. She's so head over heels for her that she just just forgets about Scott momentarily. Her brain is fried upon seeing her.
The only excuse I can make for that moment is because if in this like timeline of the comic, this is before we see her and Scott going on dates together. So she's not in a maximum amount of love with Scott as she should be right now. This is like what I mean by this is a what if comic book, like it's a fanfic timeline. This is where now, because of this one big event that changed, now all of the different characters have their arcs and narratives change, and so few benefit from this, and so many are hurt by this. Fucking Knives is worse. Kim Pine, my beloved Kim Pine, is nothing. She gets no development in the show whatsoever. She gets the best moment in the show where she has a fucking highly detailed French Yuri kiss with.
I knew you popped off when that moment happens. To be fair, I was also popping off.
I mean, poor Kim Knives shippers in the fan base, but now we have a legal one.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kim Pine's voice actor. I think she's, aside from Scott, probably my favorite performer. Actually, Knives Chau, god damn it. Knives also has a great voice. All the voice actors are amazing in this show, by the way.
Yeah,
I am very partial to Kim's.
My favorite performances is a toss-up between Mae Whitman as Roxie Richter and Chris Evans as Lucas Lee, because dude, Chris Evans is having you can tell he's having the most fun out of anyone in that studio, in that booth.
Hold on, which one did he act again?
Lucas Lee, the Hollywood star.
Lucas Lee.
Who skateboards a bunch.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, okay, I remember him. And his performance is also great. I mean, I'm still more partial to performances like Knives, and yeah, Scott's is perfect for the character.
Yeah, all right, so I have a hot take that not too many people who like the Scott Pilgrim movie share. I think Michael Cera did not capture Scott's energy at all. He captured all his loser chud in energy, but he didn't. Every time he tried to do something badass, he does not pull it off in the slightest because he's Michael Cera. He does not. Looking at the dude does not inspire confidence, whereas, in the comic book, because he's a cartoon character, he can, look pathetic when he needs to be and look cool when he needs to. Because, when he's doing those fighting poses and, blocking punches and running up to people getting ready to punch, he can look cool. But Michael Cera, because, live action, there's only so much you can do, only so many, special flashy effects you can do to hide that face. His performance was, I think, the worst part of that movie. I did not think he made for a good Scott Pilgrim in front of the camera, but behind a microphone, when doing just his voice and having the ability to, character act a little more and put a little more effort into his performance without needing to have his face be in front of a camera or having to, move his body accordingly to make his movements seem believable. He's a perfect Scott. He does better as this Scott than he does in the movie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I have no complaints about his performance. I really don't have any complaints that I remember about any of the performances.
No, fucking my favorite delivery of the whole show is Lucas Lee when he is talking with Ramona in his trailer and he's like, "Come on, I'm trying to take this seriously." Well, this is how Chris Evans talks throughout the whole show with his voice, which is hilarious by itself. But it's when he's talking to Ramona, being like, he's got, "Why are you looking for the guy who dated a high schooler? Even I wouldn't do something that stupid." And Ramona just points at the TV, and there's TMZ reporting that Lucas Lee is dating a a character playing a high schooler, and he just turns to the camera and is like, "Oh no." Without breaking character, he just goes, "Oh no."
By the way, that gag is so funny to me because Scott Pilgrim is so awful that just playing a character of him is enough to get someone canceled on national television. He's not even a pedophile, he's just playing one.
That I like to think that was the best meta joke that they did in the show. That because lo and behold, we had a few people online being like, why is Scott Pilgrim dating a high schooler?" And then that happens, and now I like to think that that moment with Lucas Lee on TMZ is just playing him was like a commentary on that.
Yeah, so something I didn't get a chance to mention this earlier, but one of the things I really like about episode 1's setup is that they set up the idea of the 7 evil X's, and Scott goes against them as the valiant hero, you'd think. However, what has to be an inevitable reveal in the comics, I would imagine, and probably in the movie too, is that Scott Pilgrim really isn't any better than them and is in fact probably far more evil. And I mean, I was yearning for the moment where he realized that.
I wouldn't say. Well, you first of all, your powers of media literacy are like go beyond mere mortal man. I wouldn't say he's more evil because the
Well, to be fair, I don't know what they do in the comics. I'm just going off of the anime.
Yeah. So what he does is not like more evil because Gideon is like straight up the villain.
Well, to be fair, he does try to bomb a villain or no,
Yeah,
bomb a theater.
He does try to commit
that would
an
be
act
more
of
evil.
terrorism.
So
Yeah,
I do take
terrorist.
that back.
He may be a pedophile, but he is damn sure no terrorist. Not my grand old Canadian lakes.
But the point would be that he's
but he is
would
definitely
fit
not a
in.
good person, and he could fit in among the evil exes. Like he's trying his hardest to not end up an ex-boyfriend, but like it could definitely happen, especially with the type of guy Scott is. And so that's Scott's major arc in the story of the comic. He's trying to it's him first of all has to realize that, oh, I am kind of a shitty person, am I? And then work towards bettering himself. And that's what makes the comic so great, because it's this push and pull of you want to see this dude get better, because you see that he is not all bad. Like, yeah, he's a good bit of him is bad, but he's not beyond redemption. He's just making stupid decisions that he needs to be smacked across the face a couple times, shook by the shoulders, and be like, no, stupid, stop doing these stupid things, stupid, and get your life together. Which is why the comic is called Scott Pilgrim, but every volume of the comic, not unlike your beloved Zari Goto, has different titles that all are like Scott Pilgrim. Like Volume 1 is Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life. Volume 2 is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. One of them is called Scott Pilgrim Gets It Together. I think that's Volume 5.
Oh, I bet that one's key now.
Yeah, and so the comic Scott is just going through this whole it's this back and forth of you want to see him become this better person. It's like BoJack Horseman. I don't know how familiar you are with BoJack Horseman, but it's the kind of guy where you see that there is good in him somewhere, and because we're human beings, we want to see the good in people, by default, because we want to surround ourselves with good people, not bad people. But it's just that he's on this path of self-destruction that he needs to learn that he's on, and also to be told by his friends that hey, we want to see you, we don't want you to be this loser, but there's only so much we can do to help you, that you have to take the final steps yourself, pal. You said it yourself, this could not, for a Scott Pilgrim virgin, this is both the worst possible introduction you can get to the Scott Pilgrim verse, and also simultaneously the best advertisement for the comic you could ask for. Because you see the building blocks, you see the DNA of the Scott Pilgrim comic, but you don't see the whole picture. You don't quite get the soul and the heart of the original.
Yeah, so the issue is that after episode 1, it just becomes an entirely different show. And God,
yeah,
I mean, you're saying it's
Scott
an alternate
Pilgrim.
universe.
It stops becoming Scott Pilgrim, it becomes Ramona Flowers.
So here's my issue. Ramona
Fellas,
Flowers...
it's 2023 and we got baited again. The main character was the woman.
So, Ramona Flowers, she was good in episode 1. as a protagonist, she is infinitely boring. I do not. She is one of my least favorite characters in the show. And she is the main
fuck up
character.
her arc by doing this. She's the secondary main character in the comic because you come to find out that it's not just that Ramona has evil exes. You come to realize that, hey, maybe Ramona isn't that great of a person also. And maybe these are just two unhealthy people finding, two dysfunctional people finding function in each other's dysfunction. But then realizing, hey, wait, this isn't very healthy, is it? But now that there is no more Scott to lean on and, have chemistry with to realize, oh, wait, this isn't, as good an idea as I thought it'd be. Now Ramona just becomes like this lovesick detective who is trying to find her one night stand boyfriend who she went on one date with and is now determined to be like, I'm the only person who truly cares that Scott Pilgrim is dead, and God damn it, I'm gonna find him.
By the way, Ramona knows that he was dating a 17-year-old, and she's still in love with him. By the way,
yeah, I was waiting for that
sink
to be.
In.
I was waiting for her. Like, I was praying that maybe there was gonna be a moment where Ramona, like, when she finally finds Scott, she's gonna be like, "What the fuck, dude? Why were you doing that?" But no, she's like so in love with him. The moment that she after all the explanation of the fucking bullshit stupid mystery plot goes down, she pulls him into his room, gives him a big hug, tries to kiss him, and it's like, why do you have no ill will? Why do you have no dislike towards him even a little bit after what you find out the kind of person he is? And but then I come to realize, oh, I kind of understand it, because in this timeline, you don't get to see how bad a person Scott is because he's not around. So I guess it makes sense that you're still in love with him because you didn't get to experience the story of Scott Pilgrim, the comic book, which before anyone in the comments types it out and be like, that's the point, Neon. Oh, okay, if that's the point was stupid.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I say that's the thing a lot, but it's a nice transitioner, okay? But I see what they're going for, and maybe in a different story, it could work. But I hate the way it's executed, at least as someone watching it for the first time. This is my first exposure to it, where you have the building blocks of the original, then you pretend they aren't there to tell a completely different story, then you half-heartedly sort of resolve what was set up in episode 1, because they do have the scene of Scott saying, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have dated you, Knives Chau. I hate this line, by the way, where he says, society, apparently apparently society looks down on a 23-year-old dating a 17-year-old.
Society is to blame, not me.
He doesn't take any, I mean, I guess, I guess it's good that he says, hey, I shouldn't have done that.
I hate
unearned.
Scott's arc in this show. Because
it doesn't even make sense.
He doesn't earn it.
Maybe it does, but yeah, he doesn't stop being that kind of person. I guess he travels back in time and sees his future self being bad. That inspires him to stop being bad.
That's so lame, because now he's not. Scott Pilgrim did not come to this conclusion by himself. He saw how even sadder and lamer his future self is, and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. And that's so lame. He was the one who got pulled from the past from the present to the future by his future self, and so now all of his character development was robbed, ironically, by him.
Yeah, so I guess this is as good a time as any to to talk about the ridiculous plot of this show. So I'm gonna just say it in the simplest way possible. No extra convolution. Scott Pilgrim the Anime is a show about Scott Pilgrim the character enacting the original Scott Pilgrim until he suddenly and mysteriously gets kidnapped. This kidnapping is done by older Scott Pilgrim to stop the original Scott Pilgrim from happening. This causes a new Scott Pilgrim to happen, where the plot is entirely different. However, Scott Pilgrim is like, ain't no way I want to be the old Scott Pilgrim. I want to, be the original Scott Pilgrim, where I defeat all the X's and get the girl. And so Scott Pilgrim tries to bring Scott Pilgrim back. Concurrent to all this, the characters in the new Scott Pilgrim are making the old Scott Pilgrim. They make a book or a screenplay, which then gets turned into a movie, but that movie goes to shit, and a documentary gets made about how Scott Pilgrim wasn't actually a success, and so then they decide to do a musical about Scott Pilgrim within Scott Pilgrim. So then all the characters, including Scott Pilgrim, attends the musical Scott Pilgrim, and then they face off against the older Scott Pilgrim. Were you confused at any point in that explanation?
There's a lot. Yeah, but by the way, 10 out of 10. I will be making that into a short if possible. There's a overlying I hate the word meta now. I hate using the word meta because
this show doesn't gain anything by being meta. Almost nothing.
Yeah, cuz like it's a meta deconstruction of the comic. It's like, fuck, that's okay. That's not what I wanted, and I'm pretty sure most Scott Pilgrim fans were not wanting. They just wanted a complete as possible adaptation of the comic book, because as far as, big screen / small screen adaptations go, there is not now, even in the face of this show now, in the wake of it, there is still not one. Hey, here's a fun Scott Pilgrim meme that only Scott Pilgrim comic fans will understand. Lisa Miller. Hey, am I right, fellas? Lisa Miller? Crunchy, you have no context for that, and I will not be providing it as...
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, you better read the comic then, boyo. So, yeah, the comic timeline, it's like, this is what it's... There's some discussion amongst the Pilgrim heads about whether the show is about the comic timeline or the movie timeline. I think that it is the comic, and they are like taking the movie as both, a way to pay lip service to it and also acknowledge its status as a commercial failure. Because it was. But
damn.
Yeah, it's a good movie that people were excited to see, and no one showed up to see it. It's like a 7 out of 10, by the way, but it's still a good movie. So like that, I guess, is cool, but doing this in the name of taking away from a straightforward adaptation of Scott Pilgrim to focus on the other characters, like, that would be fine if the other characters actually got more development, or at least a interesting new arc. That doesn't happen for Kim, that doesn't happen for Steven, that doesn't happen for Knives. It kind of happens for Neil Young. Or not Neil Young, pardon me. Young Neil. That's Neil Young is the musician who is named after. Yeah, he's fun. He's
to be fair, he is one of the best characters in the show. Yeah, he's a terminal airhead, speaks like he's high on weed at all times, but also has no clue where he is. He has some amazing lines, by the way.
Yeah, did you know that in America, these are called Mario Karts? I love when he's driving the golf cart around the studio. Like Mario Kart-esque music is playing in the show. So, beautiful. Mwah.
It's absolutely brilliant.
Everything that doesn't have to do with the characters and the writing of the show is like the best it possibly could be, which just makes me sadder that, like, if they just made an actual goddamn adaptation of Scott Pilgrim, we could be talking about having a much different conversation, but here we are.
Why did they have to put 10 out of 10 visuals on a 5 out of 10 show?
It's sad. It makes me mauled perpetually. I'm the You've heard of the perpetual motion machine? I'm the perpetual maulding machine.
And this show is the catalyst.
Yes. And I will use this podcast as my vehicle to exercise this demon of mine that I've had to harbor in me for 24 hours after watching the show. and huffing the copium. It's like, maybe it was good, maybe I didn't get it, maybe it was actually good and I'm just the retard here. But no. So instead of getting, the cool version, all our beloved characters, they get less. Fucking even the characters who didn't end up getting that much in the comic or the movie that maybe could have benefited from the anime, that didn't really happen. It kind of happens for Julie. That's the best that we get of the, the Scott's cast of characters. Then, we get nothing for Stacey. We get, Lisa Miller. Am I right, fellas? But then, basically nothing for nothing interesting for Envy Adams. Who do get more development than they ever have in any piece of Scott Pilgrim media before are the Evil X's, and even then, only a few of them, because now that Matthew Patel, the first Evil X that Scott encounters, is under the impression that he is the guy now because he beat Scott Pilgrim. He challenges the leader of the X's, Gideon Graves, who was the final boss of the comic and the movie, to be like, hey, I want to run this joint now because you were going to use this just so you could get back with Ramona. Well, now I'm going to be running the show. And they have a pretty badass fight, which just made me sadder that these cool guy fights were like kind of few and far between. They all had great animation, but not all of them had such cool.
I mean, I don't mind
choreography
that I don't necessarily mind the fights, or I guess the peaks of the fights being so far between, so long as the story backing it. See, I'm one of those guys where if a fight isn't like 10 out of 10 choreography, it's like, okay, I don't care if it's got a good story behind it. But if a fight does have 10 out of 10 choreography, I'm still gonna be kinda bored watching it if the story isn't good. And here, it's like, I can cognitively acknowledge that what I am watching should be the hypest shit ever, but it's in the least hype show of all time. That's an exaggeration, but it's like, it's this jarring disconnect for me while watching it.
Yeah, well, like, and to be fair, and I'll once again play devil's advocate. Now, even though you shouldn't have to have had this issue in the first place, because we all thought it was just going to be a normal adaptation. Now this show does benefit greatly from the viewing experience, benefits greatly from knowing who these characters are beforehand. So for newcomers, this is the worst possible thing that could happen. But even still, yeah, at least the fights are cool. I mean, Matthew is literally bawling on Gideon and catches him wearing the fake J's. That was pretty cool. Then
that was cool.
He takes over the league. Gideon becomes a little sad kitten at Lost in the Rain. Gets taken in by Julie. They have their dynamic is explored, which I don't think was even a thing before. So that's kind of
I do
cool.
like their dynamic where Gideon is just diabolical and Julie is 100% on board with it. She thinks it's hot, and I think that's funny. Like, Julie...
they tease at the end of, I don't know, did you see the teaser for where they're both back in the evil root lair?
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, so if that like does mean what I think it means, and we are gonna get more of this take on Scott Pilgrim, where Gideon is now back to his evil ways, and Julia is gonna be right there by his side. Does that mean our, Julie, Aubrey Plaza, April Ludgate of Parks and Rec fame is gonna, go through her villain arc? And I guess that'd be cool. And maybe now that we've already established that there's gonna be a new continuity for Scott Pilgrim, maybe they'll, and now they've gotten all the bullshit out of the way, maybe they can now take a possible season 2 to rectify their issues and to properly flesh out these characters that are now so woefully underdeveloped compared to their comic and movie counterparts. I want to believe that, but now that I've been burned by this first season, I have my doubts.
Well, see, the issue is I don't even want to see this continuity anymore, because
I truly don't
I
either.
just
I want to see Science Saru make
okay.
the actual a real Scott Pilgrim adaptation,
yeah,
and not this fan fiction.
I mean, hey, they can just copy and paste everything except for the last minute of episode 1, and they'll be, they already have 1 episode of it done. There we go. Just make 7 more of those. But okay, so my issue with, I mean, you can say, oh, it's an interesting new direction for the Scott Pilgrim content. Isn't this more interesting than seeing a remake of the comic?
Oh my god,
like,
okay, hold on. I know you're about to get to a point real quick, but I need to bring this up because I've been seeing this as a common defense of the show, and I need to call this bullshit out right now. So, a common defense from Scott Pilgrim fans I see of people being like, oh, what is this fan fiction what if bullshit? I wanted a normal adaptation of the Scott Pilgrim comic book. And then these troglodytes come at these people with like, why would you want to watch an adaptation of the comic when you can just go and read the comic? It's been around for, nearly 2 decades. And I'm like, okay, I guess, hey, anyone who says that, Scott Pilgrim fan who says that, if you have a particular manga that you want to see adapted into an anime, stop. No, shut up. Why would you want to see it adapted into an anime when the manga's right there, man? You could just go read the manga. It's not like a book could be enhanced with like, sound effects and music and voice acting and movement. Film.
Especially with a studio of this caliber.
Yeah, I guess you must fucking hate the Scott Pilgrim movie, people who say that. Because, why would you want to check out any adaptation when you could just go back to the comic book?
Yeah, what I was getting at
seeing
is...
that being used as a genuine defense, drives me up a wall. Like, how can you, say that and, mean it?
Yeah, it's not a good defense, and what's even more pressing to me is, okay, so you can say, oh, this is an interesting new direction, but to me, a new direction, or to put it more generally, like a plot twist of that sort, because if nothing else, this show is very unpredictable, at least, especially in terms of that specific twist. But, you can say, oh, isn't this an interesting new direction? It's maybe you think that, but to me, this twist is just not as interesting a story thematically in terms of characterization. What would you really rather have? Scott Pilgrim be, slowly learning in this sort of toned down, semi true to life, but also with a bit of, zany hijinks here and there in a world that doesn't entirely make sense, but nonetheless one that's relatively down to earth, and seeing this guy, grow past his mistakes slowly, or weird, I don't even know how to describe the show.
It feels like every episode is episodic, and self-contained, and not part of an ongoing narrative. But it clearly is.
The narrative just isn't that coherent. Nothing really comes together. It tries to sort of come together, but it has so much extraneous bullshit. It's just not a good story. You can say it's interesting as an alt-universe take, but I think it's actually kinda hard to defend this from a storytelling perspective, because they set up themes, then they don't execute on them, then they kind of half-heartedly execute on them, okay, Scott Pilgrim stops dating a 17-year-old, even though it's completely unearned. I guess he sees his, future self being bad, so he decides to stop being bad. That's cool, I guess. Ramona, I guess... See, what I thought it was going to be was, okay, we're not about Scott anymore. We're going to deep dive into Ramona Flowers. But that's also not really the case.
that
was the last...
Flowers.
Oh, well, I know you want to. Personally, I'm more partial to just about every other girl in the show. That's beside the point.
More of a Kim Pines enjoyer. But Ramona has her moments. I mean, hey man, I was popping off when they gave us Ramona Flowers jiggle physics. Yeah, I couldn't not.
I mean, you literally posted it in the server as soon as you saw it. But Ramona, you were describing her in the comics as someone who is just as toxic as her boyfriends, or maybe not just as, because one of them's a terrorist and all that. Yeah,
and that
but someone who is also flawed, who is maybe not as bad as them, but who nonetheless contributed to the toxic relationship. And there's an attempt at that in this show.
That is the only thing that the show attempts to make interesting, and then actually break down hey, what if all of these exes, because they're just pretty much made out to be people who just want to kill Scott and win back Ramona by force instead of actually wooing her like Scott was able to do. This is the only interesting thing that the show attempts to explore is that, hey, maybe Ramona, let's really explore and break down the relationships that Ramona had with these exes and see, hey, maybe they're not as evil as they are made out to be. And it works some of the time. The best thing they do with it is the episode with Roxie, which I did like. Of the new shit that they made, I did unironically enjoy the Roxie bit. Because
Roxie is definitely the best of the evil. Well, from a characterization and development standpoint, for sure the best. Some of them are personally...
Well, also by default, because she's a lesbian.
Well, yeah. But, see, they just sort of dropped that angle after a certain point, though. Episode 5 is where I think the show truly drops it. Because episode 5 is actually one of, probably my second favorite of the show, just because it's very funny. It's very enjoyable to see this production just completely fall apart. It has this unique directing style. Yeah, framed as a documentary. And the funniest part is they're filming the documentary about its downfall as they're trying to produce it. The documentarian has already predicted that it's going to go down the drain. And so it's a really funny hook. And so I enjoy that about it. And it has a lot of really funny gags in it too. But it's also the start of of Ramona Flowers, what little depth she was getting is now also, she doesn't continue getting it, where the guy who turns gay, right?
Todd.
Todd. We don't really know what happened between them. There's not really a deep dive between, oh, hey, here's how Ramona Flowers was at fault. It's just sort of not delved into. With the twins, it was definitely... there was an aspect of it, and people were like, whoa, what the fuck? That's kind of messed up, dude. But then it doesn't amount to much, honestly. It's there, and it just doesn't mean a whole lot.
I was actually, scrambling my brain trying to figure out how Ramona made up with Lucas when it's from the way that the show portrayed it, it looked like she was the one in the wrong about that relationship, and she was like, you know what? I'm not too serious about this one. I think I'm gonna break up with you, Lucas, and then move on to another guy. And him seeing that in high school, it made him feel like less of a man. So he had to be like, okay, if she didn't see me as this cool, tough, has it all skater guy, then that's the kind of person I must become to win back her heart. And it's it's ill advised to think that way, but it's it's not ever the way the show frames it now is it makes it squarely Ramona's fault, and I don't think she apologizes for it. She apologized to Roxie for leaving without a word and moving away without saying goodbye to her and ending the relationship with a definitive note. Is she there's they just talk, but they don't talk about why Ramona did that, and she doesn't be like, hey, you know what, maybe that was fucked up of me to just toss you aside like that, Lucas. I'm sorry.
I don't think there's ever a moment in the show where Ramona Flowers realizes, at least not that's portrayed in plain way. Well, with Roxie, yeah, there is that moment. But for everyone else, and what bothers me is there's no moment where she thinks back and goes, maybe I'm the reason I have so many evil exes. Maybe I'm part of the problem. Because that's what you really want to see.
I wonder if a girl who changes the color of her hair every day has commitment issues. I wonder if that was
wonder.
I wonder if that was like a purposeful thematic point.
I do really like that she changes her hair color every day, just because I like it when character designs change over time, and with a girl who dyes her hair all the time, it's very easy to change her design on a regular basis. Also, long hair Ramona, also adult,
dude,
not adult, but older Ramona.
Yeah, of the new content they've given us, future Ramona is gonna feed artists for a long time to come.
Yeah, that's the true best part of the show. Yeah, that's just give a girl longer hair, boom, you're instantly way better designed in my opinion. Crunchy seal of approval.
Oh man, yeah, well you did say you give Knives Chau the pass.
Yeah, with the context that you provided, she does get the pass, and also because she kind of rocks it in the comic. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, she looking at her in the comic, actually, she kind of reminds me of Marcy Wu from Amphibia.
I don't know who you're talking about because I have not seen Amphibia.
Oh well, maybe someday. I'm trying to think of any other thing that happened in the show that's worthy of more scrutiny. That without
the whodunit sucks. The whodunit is a terrible mystery. It lacks any. I'm a Zare Goto fan. I like me a good mystery. This has none of the intrigue that a mystery in Zare Goto would have.
I called that it was Scott. As soon as episode 2 happened.
God damn. Okay, I did not quite call that it was Scott, because I was in the frame of mind of okay. I was thinking of it as, a traditional whodunit sort of thing, where it's like, oh, okay, maybe we'll have clues to go off of. We get very few, and so there's no real intrigue. And so the show doesn't really tempt you to think about it all that hard. Because in Zare Goto, you're looking at each piece of evidence and going, what does this mean? How could they have possibly committed the murder? This is so interesting. In this show, you're like, okay, so that was a vegan portal, I guess. Oh, it wasn't a perfect vegan portal, though. I guess. The shit does that mean? How is that supposed to make me think?
What does an imperfect vegan portal mean, and what does a perfect vegan portal mean?
Yeah, it's like the reveal that it's the robot is funny, but it's also not a satisfying mystery. Because
the robot's in every episode, and the robot's up to something. He's got to be plot relevant. The reveal that the robot was being piloted by Scott the whole time, and therefore, observing the entirety of the story in retrospect is a cool reveal, I guess. But I called that it was Scott. I did not expect the time travel angle. I had thought that what had happened was here's if we couldn't get a straightforward Scott Pilgrim adaptation, we had to have this what if scenario. Here's how I would do it. We've already established that before this, the scene where he gets taken away is that he is gonna be about to get caught in the middle between Knives and Ramona, and two timing the both of them. So how perfect would it be for him to get out of facing this problem and owning up to it, then to just fake his own death?
That would be probably in character for him, let's be real.
Yeah, it would be for if we're gonna go down this what if rabbit hole, I'd much rather have it be Scott's such and have it be revealed maybe at the end of episode 3 when Ramona at the end of episode 2 and then and therefore beginning of episode 3 where Ramona is oh, I figured it out. Scott's not actually dead. He's still alive, and I've got the proof. Then we see a reveal of Scott in the background being shit, and now he realizes that the clock is running out on him, and he's like still trying to figure out how to like now untangle this web that he's gotten himself into. Like that could be fun. I'd still would have just taken a straightforward adaptation of the comic book, but at least that would
absolutely. At least that could be like a 7 out of 10.
At least it maintains Scott Pilgrim being a shitty person.
Yeah, but instead, I'm having so much trouble trying to just wrap my head around what they're going for. And I know you can summarize it as, oh, alt universe. Okay, but why this plot? What about this plot even begins to coalesce into something remotely fulfilling? It feels like such a disconnected array of ideas, so haphazardly put together. And, okay, think about the themes that you can try to get from this. Don't be like Scott, I guess, although we didn't get that in much depth. Let's see. You aren't
Don't
bound
be like this
to
Scott
a certain
Pilgrim. Be
future.
like this Scott Pilgrim.
Let's see. You aren't bound to follow in your future self's footsteps. You're in charge of your own destiny. Okay.
You know what I learned from Ramona
guess.
Flowers? If you fall in love with one person and go on one date for them, devote your entire life to them. Stop whatever is going on in your life at that moment and make it all about them. Because that's what I got from Ramona's plot. Like, she has no agency of her own. It's all, like, taken from her by Scott inadvertently because that's, like, the point of the quest. And, like, now I don't know what Ramona's all about because all I know is that Ramona is about Scott, and that's, like, really lame. And if I don't,
Ramona's
you know
so
me,
boring in this show.
You know me, Crunchy. We like to we like to edge it up a little now and here. Fucking let us not forget the famous Lico Rico joke that shall not be brought up right now. But
I think I know what joke you're getting at.
Yeah, so we're not above a funny edgy joke from time to time, but I deadass cannot think of any other way to say this, but in this show, Ramona is defined by her man. She has no agency outside of her boyfriend, her one night stand boyfriend. And I don't even say that to be edgy. I genuinely cannot construe another outcome from this.
I mean, I guess it's not technically that she has no agency because she is, at the end of the day, the one making her own decisions. But the fact that it's after
But she
one
never questions Scott. She never
questions why he's a pedophile. That feels like a pretty important thing to ask questions about, to maybe raise an eyebrow at, just a little bit. This is after one date. She's just going off of a vibe check. Yeah, we got some good vibes going. That was pretty neat. Okay, what else? But why though? It's just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And even if you do take it as, oh, this is absolutely what would happen, this is in character for her. Wow, she looks like she's... I guess the only way I can read it is she's obsessive. As soon as a guy talks about Sonic the Hedgehog with her, oh man, we're gonna get married.
Now you see why I love her so much, Crunchy.
And then one thing goes wrong in the relationship, she ditches them, and then the cycle repeats. And granted, that doesn't seem entirely out of character with how she would be in the comic. Presumably, I don't really know. But
that brings up an interesting point.
One date, yeah, it's taking that idea to an extreme. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
So I will go into this point briefly and with as few spoilers as possible. But I will say the ending of the Scott Pilgrim comic, and to an extent the movie, even though the movie paints it in very more explicit terms, the comic ends in a way that is open to interpretation. There is no definitive where are they now type beats that this ending kind of hits in the anime. The status of our characters and where they're going to end up is painted for like open for the viewer's interpretation, and I won't get into anything further than that to avoid spoilers. But if we truly believe that this is possibly be a self-contained story, and that it is, the original timeline is the comic timeline, and this is a new offshoot of the Scott Pilgrim verse, as I guess we're calling it now. This makes the comic ending retroactively worse because it means like now, hey, that open to interpretation thing? Here's how you should have interpreted these past 13 years. Things went to shit, and now their relation Scott's didn't change a bit. Scott's still emotionally needy. He's still bumming around at Wallace's. He's just as much of a loser at 37 as he was at 23. So
now that you do mention that, I feel like I'm almost in a way lucky to have not watched this as a Scott Pilgrim fan, because I can imagine myself molding uncontrollably when I would get to that part. Say, how did you feel when you saw that?
I was pleading in my head to be like, okay, but here's comes the part where you reveal that there is an out to this, and that this was not all Scott's fault. Someone put him up to this. Surely this has to be Gideon's secret master plan the whole time. It would be convoluted and stupid, but at least it would save Scott's character from getting assassinated and his ending of the comic ruined. Nope. He's just a fucking desperate, emotionally dependent loser. Just as much at the end of his comic to now in 20 years, nothing changed. Wow, what an awesome character! And it's exhausting. It makes me sad. And I don't want it to make me feel sad, but I can't help it. And that's just how I feel.
God, there's the only good things in this show. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to get to all of them. Obviously, visuals, and it is fairly
everything
fun.
On the technical aspect. On the technical aspect, this is a 10 out of 10. The technicals of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It should be in the anime of the year discussion, but not the show itself.
Yeah, that one moment where the director of the okay, there's so many good expressions. But yeah, the director, his jaw hitting the floor with the wide-eyed expression. His name is
Edgar Wrong, by the way.
That is brilliant, by the way.
I believe in Edgar's rights and Edgar's wrongs.
And my caption for that image is Gadzooks.
Yeah, dude, Scott's got the eyes popping out of his head bulging out of his head in episode 1 where he sees Knives and Ramona walking towards the same spot in the crowd and
that
dashing
was perfect.
Back.
I have never seen a man more desperate in my life, more horrified at the situation he has been brought into, or rather upon himself.
Yeah, this is an enjoyable version of Kazuya from Meant to Girlfriend.
Yeah, every expression from Knives Chau, I have them all screenshotted. And that little spinning shot of her
Crunchy Bagels videos.
Yeah, I'll definitely get some of those because they're all perfect. The moment in episode 3 where she's jamming out on the bass, her face
and they pay the slightest amount of. Yeah, they pay a little lip service to the Kim X Knives shippers out there, with the little heart that forms around them as they're jamming out together. Because let's just say there's a reason that ship exists, and that's all I'll say about it. It did not just come out of nowhere. There's a lot of little things in here. There's a bunch of cameos in the voice acting. Fucking Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who are, if you know anything about Edgar Wright, which I know you don't really, because you're not too much of a film bro like me, they are his 2 favorite actors, and they show up in most of his movies. They voice the security guards from the movie studio. Weird Al Yankovic played the narrator of the documentary.
I did see Weird Al Yankovic credited in that episode.
Yeah.
I watched
Yeah,
enough
Finn
of the
Wolfhard-
credits for that.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard of Stranger Things fame is played teenage Scott Pilgrim, and he had this sweet little post on Twitter about how he's like Scott Pilgrim was the first Blu-ray that he ever bought, and it's like how he always wanted to like be a part of the Scott Pilgrim world, and now he had this avenue to do so. Like that was really sweet. Have you ever seen Lilo and Stitch?
No. Well,
Okay,
actually,
then this.
I think I saw it when I was like 7 or 8, something like
Okay,
that.
do you remember Plinkley, the one-eyed alien who's like really thin and he kind of like talks?
No,
like,
I don't remember anything about Lilo
Oh.
and Stitch, no.
Okay, well, the Edgar Wrong, the director, is voiced by Kevin McDonald, who is Plinkley, who is I don't think he has anything to do with Scott Pilgrim or Edgar Wright. I just think that was a fun, goofy voice that they wanted. And I was like, is that motherfucking Plinkley in my Scott Pilgrim anime? And it just like made the experience a little bit better. It's just so there's so much like love put into the creation of the visuals and like the sound and everything about the anime, except for the writing.
Well, see,
And that
that's
makes
so
me
weird
so
because isn't the
sad.
writing by the guy who wrote the original?
Yes.
So how
This
did
is
it
his
turn out
fault.
like this?
I guess he didn't want to just make an adaptation. I guess he wanted to like put a unique spin on it, which, you know, at the end of the day, he's the author, more power to him, but I feel like
I
he
cannot
should have
relate to that perspective at all.
Yeah, I if I were him and I were put in the chair that he was in, and like, damn, my cult classic comic book that has a cult classic movie and a cult classic video game has this big opportunity to break into maybe the mainstream, because now we're gonna get like Japanese eyes on us, and maybe we'll introduce him to Scott Pilgrim through there. I have no idea how big the Scott Pilgrim community is in Japan, if anything, but hey, this is a good gateway. But nope. Now I guess he wanted to. That was not his modus operandi. He had different priorities, and I guess we're just gonna have to disagree on where our priorities should have lied.
See, the funny thing is, on AniList, it still has an above 80% score. It's at 82%
I
average
think-
score, 84% mean.
See, I've been checking like fan reaction, because I was very much curious. Reaction from the community seems to be like 75% positive. But then there's the other 25% that's like somewhere between, it's good, but I would have much rather have just taken a straightforward adaptation. And then ranging from that to, this sucks, I wish we got in a straightforward adaptation. What the fuck was this?
Which
I am
both
firmly
of us fall on.
Yeah, I'd say I'm more definitely leaning towards the latter half of that description and not the former. I don't think it's like an outright disaster, because it has some good ideas and cool moments that we don't see in the comic, like the whole Ramona. We do have a bit where Ramona does fight Roxie. That is comic canon, but the circumstances are now way different. In this one, especially with the way they fight. Before they just fought in I believe some kind of dark void, and she just like roller skates around her ninja techniques. But in this, they frame it in this cool way where they're fighting in a movie rental a rental video store, and already they're if I had a nickel for every time a well put together fight scene happened this season that took place in a room where the sprinklers were going off to make it look like it was raining, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
In the same season, no less.
Yeah. But then where this one takes it a step beyond Jujutsu Kaisen, where they just kept Jujutsu Kaisen's problem is that they kept that fight contained to the men's room, where they should have had a shelf of movies fall on top of Yuji and Chozo, whatever his name was, and then have them fight throughout different film genres. And thank God Scott Pilgrim came in and rectified that erroneous misstep.
And nobody even remotely questions it.
Because that's the kind of logic this world operates on. That's why it's so cool. Because it's not like, it doesn't come out of nowhere, so you're not like, whoa, this kind of breaks the logic of this world. But it also, like, it's also like so fun too. Because then at one point, Kim just like rewinds a kick that Roxie does on Ramona, and so Ramona like smashes her so hard she pops back out of the TV that Kim's watching the fight on. And so like while she's out, she takes her sword and takes the remote from Kim and smashes the remote so she can't pull that shit again. And she's like,
oh yeah, that moment was hilarious.
And then Ramona, instead of just coming out of the TV, just grabs her and yanks her back into it.
Yeah,
like,
I mean there is.
I
still
loved every bit
plenty
about
of...
that episode.
I didn't love maybe every bit, because at that point the realization, it was at the end of episode 3 that the realization finally dawned on me.
It was the one dose of
Scott
opium
back.
that I was taken down to be like, okay, you know, they gave me Amity Blight, Mae Whitman, Roxie development, and they actually made it like well fleshed out. I deadass thought she might have like joined the main cast. I thought that she was just gonna become one of the primary cast members. I would be like, oh hell yeah, I would absolutely love a have Ramona, not Ramona, Roxie palling around with Kim, even though they're not gonna be like lesbians with each other. They could be friends. They definitely have that kind of vibe. If they're willing to just immediately French each other just to see if they're compatible in a relationship, they would absolutely be hanging out together.
Yeah, but that does not happen.
It does
Instead,
not
we're
happen.
stuck with Ramona just being by, well, not necessarily by her lonesome, but her being the protagonist, but also being a very boring one, and without, well, I won't say without anyone to play off of, but it feels like there should very well be a, like, very specific deuteragonist that she has with her to play off of, but not really.
Yeah, and in doing so, now all our side characters don't get the development they need. The twins don't really get much development that they didn't already get in the comic. Because
The twins
they're
get
honestly
almost
more of,
nothing.
yeah, they're more of a plot device than characters.
The only reason they stop wanting to, stop wanting to kill Scott is just because we learned that in the future, we're chill.
homies.
So yeah, we're homies in the future.
No beef
So I'm
with
a
you, dog.
Yeah,
And like, yeah,
they just
that's like
immediately
a
stop.
yeah, it's like that's a decent, exhale out of your nose gag, but it just leaves me with like high and dry. It's like, well, why would you go out of your way to make Roxie this more interesting character now and make her more three-dimensional, and then immediately write her out of the story?
Yeah, it's just
Lucas got to come back, but not
together.
Roxie in a meaningful way. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's a really sad state of affairs.
Like I was down for Matthew Patel to be, the new big bad, because hey, that's a fun twist. The first X who gets taken out at the start of the comic is the new final boss. Okay, I'm down for that. He has a pretty cool, intimidating design and fun, Indian mystic powers.
Yeah, but the actual twist is none of them are the big bad. Kind of. I mean, they're still well, yeah, he is the true big bad at the end of the day.
Once again, will not spoil because this is probably the best part of the comic from everything that I've seen from it. This is like a keynote moment that now that I've like seen it happen, I went back to revisit the moment in the comic, and I won't spoil it, but there is a better version of Old Scott that exists in the comic where it's essentially, you can boil it down to be the same idea, but executed 100 times better in the comic than the anime. And as a hint, Celeste almost, I wouldn't quite say ripped it off, but were probably definitely inspired by it.
What, with the evil Madeline?
Yeah, with Battleline. Yes, that's all I'll say about that.
Well, hey, I like how Battleline was executed, so there you go. If it's taken notes from the good version of this reveal, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to actually read the original whenever I may get to that. But I mean, is there much else to say?
Future Ramona is just as whipped for Scott as current Ramona is, even though they say that she needed space but still was always thinking of Scott, and even went to the back to the past to make sure that the memoir that or the screenplay that young Neil writes was actually a memoir that old young Neil, which is funny by the way, writes, is that's make sure that Scott always has a story of Ramona. So like it is in Ramona's interest, like in the context of the narrative, from everything that I'm gleaning from all of these events, that she wants Scott in her life, that she cannot live without Scott in her life. And that is not how you should, probably, not how you should write your female characters. I feel like they should have a little more agency outside of, trying to exist with their man.
I mean, it's less the agency that bothers me and more the idea of, I mean,
her life revolves around
she's
Scott.
Still thinking about him.
Yeah, even if that was the case, why the fuck did they
weird.
separate in the first place? If she was still thinking about him.
I mean, the entire slant of, oh yeah, actually, you also suck in the future, you never got better in the original timeline. It just, that entire slant doesn't really feel good. It really doesn't. Also, like, how are we supposed to believe that this Scott will be better?
We don't. We can only take his word for it. And, well,
yeah,
I guess we can have
Scott's
also...
word.
Well, you know what, Crunchy? I guess we also have the benefit of the doubt knowing that Scott has literally seen what he will become if he does not change his ways, which is, once again, lame and totally unearned. It's basically like he has all his character development robbed from him. Like, in a very crude layman's terms, it'd be like if I were about to, commit a horrible crime, and then, like, my future self comes back from the future and be like, hey, don't do that horrible crime. Not because you'll, like, regret it, but because we get caught and you don't get away with it, and we go to jail. And, jail kind of sucks, bro, so don't do it. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I don't want to go to jail. Okay. Like, that's lame.
God, there's just...
It is not
I keep
inducive
on
to
saying
a good,
this, but
dynamic character.
the characters just aren't that... Well, barring episode 1, obviously, but the characters past that are only good for jokes for the most part. Exceptions aside. Let's see, the plot is stitched together without any meaningful exploration of its themes, and it's meta apropos of nothing for no benefit or gain. It's just there's nothing there to really latch on to except for, I guess it was pretty consistently funny for the most part.
If you like your Scott Pilgrim references, they do pay as much lip service as possible. They do the bread makes you fat meme. I'm very sad they did not recreate the Scott jumping out a window when Wallace is like, not. There's this awesome scene in the movie. I don't know if you see. I'll definitely have to show you it after the podcast, where Knives comes over to Wallace at Scott's place, and she's like asking where Scott is, and Wallace is like, oh, Scott, and then you just hear the sound of a window crashing in the background, and he just says, he stepped out.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, let's see, there's this, I gotta be that one guy, and be like, there's this, one gaping huge plot hole that, tears apart the entire story of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. How could Scott know what Detective Pikachu is if he's supposed to be from the early 2000s? 0 out of 10. Do better, O'Malley. SMH my head.
I mean, to be fair, wasn't there a Detective Pikachu game for the DS?
No.
I'm gonna
3DS.
actually you now. Oh, it was 3DS? Okay.
Yeah.
When did that come out?
To post 2010.
Well, there you go. I guess your actually does work.
Yeah, like, because they're pretty consistent with their references. Like originally the line isn't even about Sonic the Hedgehog when he tries to woo Ramona. It's about Pac-Man, and he just drops Pac-Man trivia on her. But I think it's funnier that they changed it to Sonic because it's a little more relevant. Because I feel like Sonic is more relevant in the current audience of today than Pac-Man is. But it's just also doubles on the patheticness because you could talk about Pac-Man to some a rando on the street and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's a pretty popular beloved arcade game. I guess that's like a cool thing that you could that's not the worst thing you could have opened a conversation about. But there's like this air of, especially on the internet, this air of sadness and patheticness where you open a conversation with a girl about Sonic the Hedgehog trivia.
There's
and
nothing more cringe.
And that fits Scott to a T. Like, yeah, Scott would absolutely do that. I bet if O'Malley could go back in time, like, if O'Malley wrote Scott Pilgrim the comic today, he would absolutely have changed the Pac-Man line to the Sonic line. And that's what a good adaptation does. It takes elements of the story that, worked at the time, but maybe for whatever reason, maybe wouldn't hit as hard in a, story today, and you change it so it makes sense and works in the context of the audience. This is one of those times where it worked, and everyone was like already memeing it online. People were like, oh my god, this is the funniest thing. And like, I take it back, Scott Pilgrim is not just like me for real. And then I even saw this one artist who recreated that scene with Sonic and Amy Rose and Sonic being like, so Scott Pilgrim? Like,
that sounds like a really good art. Did you retweet it?
I did. I think I might not have posted it.
I might have
on
to check
server,
your retweets.
Yeah. Let's see if there's the Wallace being married to a guy who works at Nintendo is a good gag. I had the biggest fight or flight reaction of my life seeing like when the Virtual Boy showed up and Scott was going through the memories of old Scott, and they took Ramona and Scott, after they got married in the future, they took their honeymoon to Universal Studios, which, yeah, I guess because Universal helped produce this anime. And then the fucking Minion mascot showed up, like a jump scare.
Oh,
in my Scott Pilgrim Science Saru anime, and I had the greatest fight or flight reaction of my life. I started
despicable.
hyperventilating.
I do not blame you whatsoever. Even I had to pause and go, what? But why?
Scott, like, Scott lacing Scott's drink with nanomachines to deploy the AK field between him and Ramona, the anti-kiss field, is very stupid, but it's the fun kind of stupid, not the
I feel like
kind
that
of stupid.
works.
They did manage to bring the Sonic thing full circle by having the two Ramonas fuse together to become Super Ramona, and then have the Scots be like, just like Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't like I didn't really vibe with the Super Ramona like as a concept, but
it felt very random. Like, why did
Yeah.
Ramona know that she could fuse with her future self? I guess you can tack it up to, oh, well, we're working on SpongeBob logic. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but that's like, it's a character thing. It's different.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the kind of thing you should anchor like the resolution of your story to.
Yeah, definitely not.
Unless you're trying to rule of cool it like My Beloved SpongeBob SquarePants the movie, where SpongeBob pulls these magic guitar powers literally out of nowhere. But shut up, it's like way too cool to. You're gonna sit here and you're gonna tell me Goofy Goober Rock is not peak fiction, is not keenography in the purest sense of the word? Get the fuck out of here.
I mean, even in SpongeBob, like, its logic allows for that sort of leniency, whereas with Scott Pilgrim, it feels a little more grounded, and so it feels a little weird for, oh, hey, I know I confuse with my future self. Like, when she first said that line, I was like, oh, is she, like, rejecting Scott? That doesn't really make sense. Oh, okay, they're fusing inexplicably.
Yeah, and with that, they just kind of get together in the end, and
No one
it's
learned anything.
yeah, we didn't really learn anything. No one really changed for the better. Well, I guess if Scott changes for the better, it will not be because of him. It will be because he just knows what will happen if he doesn't. So that sucks.
I mean, I guess he changes for the better, but it's not like that change was...
didn't earn it.
Yeah, it wasn't like a satisfying change.
And that is Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, the 2023 adaptation of the Scott Pilgrim comic book series. Pilgrim Bros, we got cucked. I'm sorry. I'm like, if you like the series, that's fine. Maybe you're huffing the massive amounts of copium because this is the first new piece of Scott Pilgrim content we've gotten in 13 years. Or maybe you do just genuinely appreciate it. I've seen guys like guys I don't respect like Mother's Basement and guys I do respect like Schaeferless talking up this show and being like, oh
yeah, I saw Schaeferless's tweet.
Yeah, I saw him
very
tweet,
confused
and then he
upon
tweeted
finishing the show.
Yeah, and he said this is the antidote for our modern reboot culture. I'm like, did we fucking watch the same show? Like, more power to you that you found enjoyment in a show we could not, but all I can say to you, Crunch, is that I'm sorry. I'm half sorry because I can't take the full blame for this. You knew that I knew that I didn't know that this was going to be a not adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, I know you were very excited for it.
I half apologize for this being your introduction to Scott Pilgrim because this was the weakest first impression you could possibly have gleaned from it. I promise you on everything, the comic is peak.
I mean, I know the comic is peak because the first episode was peak. The first episode feels like something out of a 9 or a 10 out of 10.
That's the worst part about it, is because it's the fact that they dangled the carrot in front of us and then they yanked it back, because all of the marketing, like this is one of those like, ooh, you can't really call it false advertising because they didn't exactly lie about anything, but they didn't tell the fucking truth either.
Dude, it's like episode 1 is the carrot, and then the latter 7 are just a 50-pound log being dropped onto our collective heads.
I just wanted the carrot, dude. I didn't want the log to drop on my head. I just wanted the carrot. It was a good tasty carrot. Oh, so many nutrients. It would help me see better. Help my growing bones and my little boy body. But I guess Netflix wants to deny me of my essential nutrients. That's my biggest takeaway. Netflix and Bryan O'Malley do not want you to have a healthy diet. They want you to be malnourished, and they want you to starve, viewer. They want you to starve.
So what is the score looking like for this show? I have decided it is a 5 out of 10 for me. Because
I'm on the same boat.
You can see the charm, but it's
like the building blocks are there,
heavily...
except they were not handled by a team of construction professionals. They were handled, and I hate saying this because especially when the production is this good, but as far as the writing goes, and I know because O'Malley himself, like, I don't know what he was thinking. I truly cannot understand it, but I'm sorry, it feels like it was constructed by preschoolers. It's like the difference between a cool-looking skyscraper and a loose thing of building blocks with, like, different shapes and numbers and letters on them. And they don't mean anything.
It's incoherent. It's not thematically poignant. The characters start good for an episode and then devolve. It's just... oh, God, it's so bad I had to sneeze. It was giving me allergies.
And you know
But-
what the little Minishino cherry on the shit sundae is? I feel like once I read the entirety of the Scott Pilgrim comic, like all in, like, so I have the 100% clear picture and not just the, you know, I've love it by proxy from its aesthetic alone and from what little I've read of the comic. I've read up to volume 2, and I've had, you know, the whole story explained to me through YouTube essays before. But I feel like once I actually experience the entirety of the comic for myself, I'm gonna hate this show even more.
Yeah, I get that sense as well.
'Cause I feel like the perpetual molding will reach a state of full mast. It'll reach the infinite speed.
Yeah, although to be fair, it does not seem like something I'll ever rewatch, except for maybe out of morbid curiosity if I read the comics. And
There is a
I mean, I
video on
will,
YouTube
and I
that
will
came
enjoy
out day
them.
one called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, but it's only the bits with Knives Chau in it. So I feel like that's the bit you're gonna watch the most of if you ever come back.
Oh yeah, well if that exists, then that's the show becomes obsolete at that point. Except for the first episode, barring his death. If you just pause it right before he dies, you know, then you have the full experience.
Yeah,
That's all that you need to get from this show, and also the Knives Chau compilation.
the last note that I have for it, opening banger, the little song at the beginning of episode 1 that they play for Knives, also fun. I wish we got more of those kinds of songs in the show. But I guess you couldn't really have that without Scott, could you?
Yeah. I mean, I like the opening. The song probably isn't playlist worthy for me, but I do like the visuals. The ending songs, I'm sure they're all good, but
There's a
skipped
surprising
them.
amount of
It's
licensed
a black
music in this
background.
show, which, well, I guess I shouldn't say surprising because the main character's in a band, and you know, a lot of the characters are named after Scott Pilgrim is named after a song called Scott Pilgrim.
Well, there you go. There's some trivia for you.
Yeah,
But yeah, like
Neil young Neil.
I'm sure the ending songs are all good, but yeah, like I ain't sitting on a black background for that long, especially when
Yeah.
I was already up against the clock for this podcast.
Yeah, and Envy Adams singing a pop rendition of "I Will Remember You" at Scott's funeral. Like that's fun. I wish the show was more fun and less whatever the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is. I wish it was less Scott Pilgrim Takes Off and more Scott Pilgrim, you know, is Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Scott Pilgrim, etc., etc. Every name of every volume. That's what I wish Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was. But alas, that is not the timeline we live in. Though Science Saru pulled us out of that timeline, not unlike Scott being pulled out of his timeline, and this is the timeline that we ended up in. And how I wish we could change it.
Having seen the anime in full, I am very curious in some of the discourse on Twitter now. See, like, well, what if I type in Scott Cawthon and see the arguments unfolding?
Did you say Scott Cawthon?
God damn it, that's the FNAF.
Yeah, that's the 5 Nights at Freddy's
I actually
guy.
I hate myself. Scott Pilgrim. That is the worst. That's the worst flub I've ever had. I couldn't have flubbed worse there.
I'm insulted that you think that the two are comparable. Well, I don't know. Maybe if we're talking objective quality, or maybe the FNAF movies could be on a similar level of the Scott Pilgrim anime.
I have no interest in watching the FNAF movie, so hey, I guess I'll never know.
Neither do I. And yeah, with that, viewers, I'm sorry. I wanted to be positive this podcast. I went into this hoping that I was gonna slap this baby with a 9 or even a 10 out of 10. But don't blame me, blame O'Malley, and blame everyone who thought it was a good idea that we didn't deserve a animated adaptation of Scott Pilgrim. It's not my fault I didn't enjoy it, goddammit. It's literally not what I wanted. And not even in
not what I wanted.
not even in a
either.
cool, you think you wanted this, but actually would give you this cooler thing, and you're like, oh whoa, I never even wanted this, but now that I have it, it's so cool. It's like, no, I wanted this thing, and now this thing that you've presented to me as an alternative is not as good. In fact, I might even go as far to say it's not good, full stop, period.
It is definitely not good. It's not quite bad just because of the building blocks that are there.
You know what? You know what?
My God.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of My Adventures with Superman. How it had the potential to be like so it's unique and to stand out on its own, and have this incredible, buzz about it. But now, seeing the direction that it took in its own throughout the course of the show, my patience and my love for it dwindled. Even in spite
I will
of its
say
good ideas.
at the very least it's better than Maz, just because the core building blocks are coming from something that seems like a 9 or a 10 out of 10, whereas with Maz the building blocks were sort of to me not very good to begin with in the way they were presented.
All right, well, my final question then that I'll pose to you is this: who would you rather date, Maz Lois or Takes Off Ramona?
I'd have to go with Takes Off Ramona, just because, A, she has longer hair, and secondly, Lois from Maz will flip out on you if you don't divulge your most personal secrets on the first date. But Ramona...
Whereas Ramona is cool with you cheating on her with being a pedophile.
Yeah. So there we go. I can do whatever.
Literally every anime fan's dream. And with that, we are done with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It's sad that it turned out this way, but hopefully there are brighter days ahead for the Scott Pilgrim anime if they decide to continue it. And for us and you, viewer, if you want to see us talk about more anime like this and have, fun conversations, if you made it all the way this far, you're a real trooper. We'd greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the word subscribe because YouTube just rolled out a new thing on mobile where the subscribe button highlights if you're not already subscribed. So hopefully that entices you with visual eye candy to click on it. So click on it.
Look at the eye candy. It's so clickable now. Come on, you just want to click it.
Yeah, like the video, head on down to the comments. We really want to hear from you guys this time because the conversation surrounding this show fascinates me to no end, and I want to, be involved in it as much as possible. So please sound off in the comments what you guys think of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Did you enjoy it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Please let us know. That'll do her for this episode of Castaway Anime. I'm Neon Manta.
And I'm Crunchy Bagels.
And you'll see us next time.